President Trump put it out on Truth Social. He just posted it. Mike Lee is saying the things that I believe.
Welcome out to God and Country. We have an excellent guest with us today with Rob Axson. Rob Axson, how are you doing today?
Hey, doing very well. It's good to be with the two of you guys.
We're happy to have
One
you.
week before convention.
Yep.
It's getting down to the wire. How are things going as far as the emotional state and how things are stacking up for it? Because you're doing two things at once. You're campaigning and
You still got to do the work of the chair.
you still have to set it
there's
up.
still a lot of stuff to do. Luckily, there's a fantastic team of people that we have in place on our convention committee that are helping organize and execute all of that. There's a lot that I'm engaged in, but truly it's a team effort in anything that is worth doing in life, and certainly in a volunteer organization like the party.
Yeah.
You have a lot of really good people, and that's been very positive. Campaigning is tiring, but it's also inspiring. There's so many good Utahns in our delegate pool. We've got roughly about 4,000 delegates statewide, and you've got all of these different talents and ideas and perspectives and questions, and the conversations have just been phenomenal. And they're not always easy conversations. I'll tell you, some of the best conversations, it's people who have concerns or questions about why I did something or what my perspective is. And in the course of that conversation, you can learn a lot. And I think it's a valuable process. It's one of the reasons on a little level, in a party, it still has the elements of what it means to be in a republic and this benefit that we have in our system of government in the United States of electing people to represent you, that feedback that happens from the conversations back and forth and being accountable and available, it's invaluable. So love the process, but certainly looking forward to next week at the state convention, being with everybody. It's the culmination of a lot of time and effort and conversations.
So how is it trying to get enough time to do both? I mean, there's only so many hours in the day.
Yep.
You still have a job too,
Yep.
right?
It's exhausting. But again, it's worth it. You can't take anything with you, right? No amount of money made in life goes with you to the other side. No amount of hours slept goes with you to the other side. I'm one who likes to try to live life to the fullest and do as much good as possible. So having a season where you're doing all of this effort for the party, still providing for your family and doing other things in your community and church service, it's okay. There's enough to do all of it, and there's enough to do it well, because ultimately I believe that we're better when we're building community. And I think party politics is a great way to build community for the state of Utah.
I bet your wife and kids are probably going to be excited when it's all done, right?
Oh,
go back to normal.
Absolutely, but I've tried to include them in the process. Like, I'll tell you, one of the things from the last 2 years that has been an absolute highlight for me was when we went down and we were knocking doors for President Trump. I actually checked my 2 oldest kids out of school and took them with me. So spending 4 days knocking doors in 110-degree weather for Donald Trump in Arizona was awesome. So including them in the process, it's made it a fun team effort for our family. And
What
it's
a great
family
memory,
effort.
too.
Oh, absolutely. They got
Did
to
you
meet
grow
President
up
Trump, and it
here
was
in-
awesome.
Did you grow up here in Utah?
Yep. So grew up here in Utah, grew up in Salt Lake County until my parents divorced. We were still there in Salt Lake County for a couple of years. My dad moved to Canada, where he was from. So I would spend the summers, majority of the summer up in Canada with my dad, then the last bit of the summer and the school year with my mom here in Utah. So we were there, and then later moved down to Utah County. So grew up there, graduated from Lone Peak High School back when it was a new school. Now it's an old school. It's funny, in Utah County, and I know you guys have all seen it grow, but I will often describe it to people who are new to Utah. It's like, well, really, how different is Utah County? And I point out, well, the summer before my senior year of high school, there was still a cattle guard to get on the freeway there in Lehigh, and now there's a Porsche dealership. So from cattle guards to Porsche dealerships, that's how much change and growth has happened in Utah County. But yeah, grew up down there, then went to the University of Utah for a year, off to an LDS mission in South Korea, and then back and finished my schooling at the U.
Well, I love Utah County. I'm born and raised in Utah County guy too. I was born and raised in Provo.
There you go.
Left on my mission, and then in the middle of my mission, my parents moved to Alpine, and so
Alpine is where I grew up. There you go.
yeah, my parents still live in Alpine, and then my next brother, not my next brother, but the third brother, he did 1 year in American Fork, and then very next year, Lone Peak opened up, and then he was up in Lone Peak. So my
What's your brother's name?
Mike Kennedy, and then Daniel
So-
served up that
Yep.
was up in Lone Peak, and then my two sisters were also up there.
My wife, who also went to Lone Peak, and my older sister was at AF and then over to Lone Peak. I know the family. It's funny putting the connection together. Didn't know that you grew up down there and that you were part of that family. But yeah, down there in Alpine, it's a great place to have grown up.
Yeah,
but
so
very
yeah,
different
my brothers
nowadays.
went to the very, very first year it was open
There you go.
because they were all originally AF people, so
Oh, I love that.
cavemans.
Yep.
So kind of tell us how you were brought up,
Mm-hmm.
the strengths that you got from your mother, the strengths you got from your father, kind of how that gave you the principles and values that you hold dear right now.
Well, I tell you what, this is one of the things that I love about Utah is Utah has always been a family-oriented state. Doesn't matter what religious background you have or don't have or ethnic background. It's clear that Utah prioritizes family, and we've done that since the get-go. And obviously there's times that we can improve that. It's not like we're always perfect, but by and large, Utah does it better than just about any other state in regards to promoting family. I think there's strength that comes from family values, from community values. So yeah, growing up with a single mom for many years, I relied on her. She did a lot to show the elements of hard work. And I'll tell you, there was a lot of hard times growing up. And there were times where just how to make ends meet. Even as a little kid, I realized, man, we're struggling. Yet my mom worked her tail off, and she never relied, and nothing against people who need to rely on some help and assistance, but she decided to just double down and work more hours and different things. And I got to see that from her as this element of hard work and how to make sure that you're taken care of. At the time, she had myself and my older sister. And so appreciated that from her. And from that, it was also very clear God is real, and God knows you, and God loves you, and you have a savior. And so that was something that was just foundational for me. Obviously, as you grow up, you explore what you believe, and you have this element of learning what your faith looks like. But that foundation for me of a belief in God and a belief in Jesus Christ just was rock solid. It's never been something that I've had to question, and I've relied a lot on that. Ultimately, too, like there's just so many good people in Utah. Good people in church and church leaders and extended family. I had a great aunt and a great uncle. So my mom's aunt and uncle, they were more like grandparents, and they lived nearby when we were living there in Salt Lake. And just these people who, are a generation or two generations ahead of you, decades ahead of you, that love you and take care of you and engage in your life. We need more of that. And I think it's invaluable when you have good examples and mentors and people who truly love you in your life, and it gives you some strength and stability. But I'll tell you, for politics, it's actually back to 1988. I was in kindergarten at Ensign Elementary in the Avenues, which is where we were living at the time. And I went into school, and we were just talking about like presidents, if I remember right. We were learning about what that is. And I knew that my mom liked Ronald Reagan, but I mean, you're 5. You don't really know what the president is. And so I remember I was going in there, and this woman comes out of a booth, one of these, what I now know is a voting booth, but she comes out, and it was my primary teacher. And I remember saying, well, what are you doing here? And I don't remember the exact words, but if, in effect, she's like, well, I was just picking who the next president is. And my mind was blown that my primary teacher was picking who the next president was. And that created a spark for me. I truly, from a 5-year-old age, I've been interested in that intersection of like politics, the freedoms we have in this country, how you can access those, and that we have this ability to really improve the lives of your neighborhood, your community, your family. And it's all because my primary teacher picked the next president of the United States.
That's actually quite awesome to be able to see that. And I love the kind of the upbringing, because nowadays you get this entitlement that's just going on rampantly, and everybody just kind of entitled with, you owe me this, and I should have this, and I should be making $100,000 right out of college. And with the entitlement, there's like no work ethic. So I want it, but I don't want to work for it either.
Yep.
Even me as a business owner, I've been a business owner my entire life, and from even 20 years ago to now, the work ethic is completely different. The generations are completely different from when I grew up where we were instilled with this tremendous work ethic. And my parents were not well off. We were in the poor side of Provo, and I understood to be appreciative of what I had, and understood that you had to work for it. And as a kid, I was out doing my paper routes and collecting cans just to have a little nickels and dimes.
Daily Herald? Is that who you did it for? I was a paper boy for the Daily
I was the
Herald.
Utah County Journal.
Okay. Well,
At a penny a
competitors.
paper?
Competitors.
Yeah.
All I know is that bike ride seemed really hard at first, and then as the papers get out of your bag, it
gets
suddenly
a lot
had a little
lighter.
bit more
Yeah.
steam in that bike.
But it's that work ethic that it gets instilled into you. And then once you have that work ethic, and then jumping into politics, jumping into other things is not so hard because you don't have that sense of entitlement, and you can actually grow with that. So from growing up in Utah County, your professional life, how'd you get into that? And then how did that lead to
where things are now.
Well, how did it lead to Mike Lee first, and then getting in with Mike Lee?
Relatively quickly after I graduated. So, like I said, I served a mission in South Korea. I thought that I was going to go into business or law focused on conflict resolution. So all of my college experience at the University of Utah, it was international studies and political science with this focus on how to resolve conflicts. And at the time, this was early 2000s, we're in the Iraq War. So I was looking at issues of terrorism, issues of conflict between countries. A lot of emphasis was put on actually studying Hezbollah in Lebanon, and then studying the North and South Korean conflict, those two issues. So that's where I thought I was going to go. A little thing called Bear Stearns going under, and the economy suddenly changing right when I'm graduating from college kind of changes some of those dynamics. And as I saw, job opportunities disappear, and half the legal jobs in America disappeared, and twice the number of people went to legal or to law school. I looked at it and it's like, okay, I'm not phenomenal at math, but I can do math well enough to know that that's not the perfect time to jump into law school. So what do I want to do? So I decided to extend an additional semester and ended up doing an internship with Congressman Rob Bishop from the 1st Congressional District back in Washington, D.C. So did that actually right when President Obama was coming into office. So phenomenal time to be back there to see somebody who's at the start of their presidency. So this was the spring of 2009, who you adamantly disagree with their policies. And I get to see the start of this fight for Obamacare. I mean, just a very disastrous bill, but it also ended up being the start of the Tea Party movement. It was literally, as an intern, that whole thing started with people would send in like the tags of tea into members of Congress. So I remember we were opening the letters as interns, and there's all these like tea labels and things. And it was the start of like the Tea Party movement. So it's just phenomenal to see that experience. After that, came back to Utah and got involved in campaigns. So helped on a couple of municipal campaigns first, and then jumped into a couple of state legislative races that I was helping, and then was early on introduced to a guy named Mike who was running for the U.S. Senate against Bob Bennett, and I knew that I thought it was time for a change, and I wanted to see like what some of these other candidates had to offer. So I went and met with a bunch of them, and like I said, I was introduced to Mike right when he was announcing his campaign. Very quickly identified that Mike Lee is saying the things that I believe. His concern with the growth of government, his concern with a move away from constitutional principles at the time, and he's held to this, but his concern with the overly easy use of military force and putting at risk the lives of Americans to exert yourself on the world stage, and his concern for that. Like, that just matched with where I was. So I very quickly got on board with him and actually joined his campaign early on. So spent about a year, a little under a year, working on his campaign. Once he was elected, he offered me a position on his staff. So I joined his staff immediately thereafter, spent 3 years in D.C. working on legislation. Came back to Utah with my family, and then spent an additional 9 years or so in the Utah office, the last 7 of which I was his state director. So managed our state operations, all of the staff, and really just tried to fight for Utah and conservative principles. It was phenomenal. I really got to know just about every road and every town in Utah. So loved that. 2022, he's up for reelection. And I told him, I thought I was only going to work for you for 2 years. And here we are 12 years later. Let me help you get reelected. But after the legislative session at the first of the year, I'm going to head on off to the private sector. So I kept that plan. May 1st, 2023 is when I left the office and started my own business. But about 6 weeks before, I realized Carson Jorgensen was not running for re-election as the party chair. So I decided, you know what, I guess I've got things to offer. I had some ideas. I certainly had a network and an experience I thought would be beneficial for the party. So I ran for party chair. So right when I was kind of taking a step back from politics, I jumped into a voluntary full-time job of politics.
Sounds like you had great mentors and you were surrounded by great people too.
Phenomenal humans. And that's really where, like I've mentioned, I think we're at our best is when you have people around you that are bringing you up, that are sharing. And I think it's always a good reminder, what are we doing to make sure that we're good mentors to others and not pulling up the ladder behind us? We need to make sure we're helping people up through the process.
So how did you get introduced to Mike? I mean, how did that introduction happen? And then go into kind of what did you learn? Because obviously we all love Mike. He's probably one of the best senators we've ever had.
Absolutely.
What was that learning process that you had going through those 12 years with him?
So interestingly, he had a former law partner who introduced me to him, and it was a gentleman whose legislative race I was running as a campaign manager, a guy by the name of Derek Brown, who's now our state attorney general. So Derek had never been in the legislature. I was running his race. He practiced law with Mike. He's like, hey, let me introduce you to my friend Mike. And he introduced me to Mike. And again, like I mentioned, it was very quickly apparent that this guy is the real deal. And I'll tell you, in all the years that I worked with Senator Lee, we've been friends now and engaged in fighting for what we believe to be true for about 16 years. So I've known him a long time now. And he is what he portrays himself as. And there's no facade to the guy. Like, he says he believes in the Constitution to his voters and as a candidate to voters to get their support. Well, guess what? Behind the scenes, he's saying the same thing. Like, he is a consistent, authentic, sincere human being, wicked smart. So absolutely a pleasure to be with somebody in a professional setting that you get to learn from them. And there were a lot of battles that we had on issues that we were working on, and being able to
kind of go through one or two of those, just so we can kind of get a sense of the inside workings of his office, and give us a battle where you didn't think you were going to come out on the upside, and he kind of came out and showed us what he's really made of.
Let me go back to shortly after I first went back to D.C. in his office. There's a guy out of Philadelphia named Kermit Gosnell, and just a horrendous human being who was engaged in abortion clinics, and he owned abortion clinics. But it was apparent that not only was he engaged in abortion clinics, but when children would survive that procedure, that horrendous effort, he gave no care to them, and he even allowed women to die on his operating table. So he actually was being prosecuted, rightfully so. But it became this catalyst to kind of help jog people's realization that it isn't just this debate of life and choice and where you are, but really there was evil in there that should bring together, in spite of our differences of the opinion of that policy. We can have those opinions, but you should be able to recognize evil when there is evil. And I had the fortunate in regard to doing the right thing, but unfortunate because it was so heavy opportunity to really do a lot of time on this issue and do a lot of research and prepare a lot of briefings for Senator Lee. And I'll tell you, like, shedding tears with a United States Senator late into the afternoon and evening as you're trying to do the right thing and trying to do so prayerfully was a sanctifying experience for me, and one that I more firmly kind of realize the potential we have with good elected officials who really do put their faith in God and do put their commitment to do what's right. And I got to see that with somebody like Senator Lee. Now, did we prevail? No, we didn't prevail in any measurement in the immediate, but we continued to make that moral argument that life matters and is worth defending. And I think it's that collective effort that has happened through generations that has changed some of the realities here in this country. But we still have work to do. We still have an effort that we have to engage on the issue of life to make sure that women feel supported when they are in crisis and feel like there's options other than abortion, and that we can fight against that being an option, but in a way that does not condemn human beings. Let's bring them along in the process so that they have other alternatives, and we can support life. That's what I want to see. That's been one of my passions, but that was a privilege to literally be shedding tears with a United States Senator engaged on policy, but policy that had so much meaning beyond just legal words.
Well, I've seen him fight a lot, and I've seen him fight hard, and I've seen him run the committees, and just the detail in his questions. People try to kind of beat around the bush and try to speak with generalities, and he kind of pulls them in and says, "No,
he's so smart.
You got to be very, very specific on these questions, because I'm not going to take the pleasantries from you."
Well, and watch this with Senator Lee. It's quite impressive. He'll reference like a part of the Constitution or a portion of the Federalist Papers, and he'll kind of be like, "Oh, in the Federalist Papers it says something like this." He's got it memorized. It's verbatim. Like, he's actually saying it exactly correct. He has an absolute trap of a mind, just brilliant on the law and all of these things, and on 80s rock lyrics. Like, it's just phenomenal. So when you talk with him, you can get him going on 80s rock lyrics, and he's got them down.
Well, he has said his parents, like, that was dinner time talk, right?
Yeah. No, he's not joking when he says that.
Amazing. I can only wish I knew a tenth of what he knows.
Oh, you and me both.
Well, I'm glad that Roe versus Wade is now back to the states,
where it should have always been.
Where it should have always been, and we're making a lot of headway with that, because it's kind of sad how they've twisted women into thinking that that's their only solution. But now it's gone from being a solution to an awkward situation to it's birth control now, and that's just what it's turned into. And there's a lot of feminists out there that just, it's a fetus, it has no rights. It's
a clump of cells.
Clump of cells,
even
it has no rights.
What they say. Yeah.
Happens to have a beating heart, but
and different
it's
DNA.
a clump of cells with a beating heart. Yeah.
Yeah, I listen to a lot of Charlie Kirk stuff where he's trying to combat that. It's kind of funny, the reactions that he gets from people, just the shock, and they're like, well, how can you think that? But like you were saying, it's having that moral aspect and bringing God into it, and that's where people lose God, is when they start pushing values like that. God no longer exists.
Yep, I agree.
And those morals and values are just out the window. And we've gotten a lot of comments, because we're God and country, we're trying to bring God into these things, and you can look at our comment section, they'll say, God doesn't belong there, you're not supposed to be talking about that. And
and the argument of separation of church and state, that's not in the Constitution. It was a private letter of correspondence between Thomas Jefferson and John Adams. But try to throw that one at us, and fail to recognize that the founders wanted to protect people's right to faith from being infringed by the government. It was never meant to protect the government from people's expressions of faith.
It's freedom of religion, not freedom from religion. We said that in our very, very first podcast, and we're going to push this. It's freedom of religion, not freedom from religion. It's where the government can't push a single religion, but we're all free to believe in God. And then I've pointed this out many times, that our founding fathers, you weren't allowed to run for office unless you had a belief in God. You had to profess a religion of some kind. They didn't trust you, right? Because they knew that the Constitution was solely or completely insufficient for a nation that was not God-fearing. Because we get our base, we get our God-fearing principles from our belief in God. And the Constitution comes, the majority of it, from the Bible. And that's where they got the principles from.
Yeah.
And so to have people like you that are, look, God helps me make my decisions, my morals and principles are based in that, and that leads into my politics. And the way that Mike Lee does the same thing, and he sees the pain and sorrow that is out there and tries to help with the pain and sorrow, but he also sees the moral values that are out there and does everything he can to stand up for those things. And that's what we need in a party cheerleader too, because that's going to direct the whole party here in the state of Utah. And here in the state of Utah, we pride ourselves of being one of the most conservative states. We're dwindling in that.
Yep. Some places we're falling woefully short.
Woefully short of being the most conservative out there. Idaho's starting to be the most conservative state, and then Kansas is starting to beat us out and being the most conservative state. We should be the most conservative and the most red state that's out there, and we're losing a lot of that. And it boils down to our elections, and like you said, getting people like a Mike Lee into offices where people stand up for those morals and values. And the party chair has a lot to do with that.
And collectively, it's every Republican that believes in our party platform. We need to do what we can, and we all have different strengths and talents. Some people are very good activists, and they engage in persuasive comments on or articles or posts on social media. That's phenomenal. Others are good donors. Others are good volunteers knocking doors. Others are really good precinct chairs. We need all of it. Wherever your talents are, give it to the party in promoting our principles and platform. That's where we ultimately build a lot of success, and then it gives political expression to those founding principles, those principles that we all learned growing up in our families, like hard work, like you were talking about, and then of course what you learn in developing your faith, whatever your faith is, that belief in God. Those find expression politically through party politics, and I believe the Republican Party uniquely does the best at that.
Yeah, we don't need to bring any one religion into our politics, but we all, like I said at the very beginning, doesn't matter if we're Mormon, LDS, or we're Catholic, or we're Jehovah's Witnesses, or we're Southern Baptists. We all have base principles that we believe in combined. We all believe that murder is wrong. We all believe that rape's wrong. We all believe that abortion's wrong. There are base principles that we have as Judeo-Christian people that we need to figure out how do we work together on those same principles instead of picking each other apart and say, well, you're a cult and you're not a cult, or you don't believe in the same Christ I believe in too. Put all that to the side. We can make those arguments on the side, and it's good to have those arguments. But when it comes to our political future and the way we're running the nation, we need to come together as a Judeo-Christian body. Because as a Judeo-Christian body, if we were to come together with that type of unity, the left would never win another election.
100%
But
agree.
for some reason, we bicker amongst ourselves so much that I'm voting left just because I don't like you.
It's so unhelpful.
It's so unhelpful. Even though that they espouse nothing that I believe in, we're antagonistic enough to each other. If you go that direction, I'm going the other direction.
Yeah, there's a guy, and I've shared this quote a handful of times as I've been talking with delegates because it's one of my favorites. But Frederick Douglass, one of my favorite people in American history, and what he did to fight for his own freedom as a former slave, and just brilliantly articulate these principles of freedom. Early Republican, but phenomenal human being. He has this quote that says, I will stand with anybody or work with anybody to do what's right and with nobody to do what's wrong. And I think we need a little bit more of that. When there's people outside of party politics who are doing the right thing, we should support them. And sometimes when there's somebody even within our own tribe, our own political tribe, the Republican Party, who are doing the wrong thing, you don't give them cover for that. You stand with people to do what's right. Another quote that I think fits in that same vein is another early Republican, but Abraham Lincoln. He has this quote of stand in the right place, like find the right place, stand there and stand there firmly. And so find that right place and stand firm. And I think it behooves all of us to occasionally check in with ourselves and ask that question, am I in the right place? And if you are, stand firm. And if you're not, move.
Quote that I taught my children from the time they were growing up, and this was instilled in all my kids, and it's, you do the right thing because it's the right thing to do and for no other reason. There's no other reward. You're not doing it because you're going to get in trouble or not get in trouble, get paid or not get paid. Throw any reward, whether it's a positive reward, negative reward, I'm going to get spanked, I'm not going to get spanked. Throw all the rewards out. You do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And for no other reason. It's not the recognition, it's not the glory, it's not the power, it's not the publicity, it's none of that. You do the right thing because it's the right thing to do and for no other reason. And I instilled that into him. I made him memorize it. You do the right thing because it's the right thing to do and for no other reason. Period. End of story. And when you have that type of a base principle, then it doesn't matter what comes at you. It doesn't matter, again, if you have a good supposed conservative person that's supposed to be on your side and promoting conservative values, and all of a sudden he does something leftish or wrong, you're not afraid to call him out on it. It's not appeasement. It's not not going to be antagonistic. It's not I'm not afraid to stand up for my rights, or not necessarily rights, but for my values. Because that's why I fear it's happening a lot is we get, as a Republican Party, so anti-confrontational that it's the slightest little argument, all of a sudden it's confrontational.
Yeah.
You're no longer standing up for something. And we get into this attitude, well, it's okay, it's not that serious, it's not that bad. But I've been pointing out for the last couple of episodes that we've done here is Satan, the left, anything has to do that. They like these slow little incremental steps.
Yep.
They like getting a win, and then we're all frustrated because they got the win, and they put a pornographic book in the school or something like that, or they let reading time go on with some guy dressed up as a girl, whatever it is. They got the pronouns in, whatever it is. They like these small incremental steps, and then they just let it settle. Yeah. Right. They just let time go by. No one's thinking about it. It's out of sight, out of mind, and then it's normal. It normalizes, and people just accept it. And then, okay, it's time for the next step, and they throw the next one, and there's a big old hoopla about it, and then we're sitting back here just trying to be antagonistic, and we let this happen to us slowly, incrementally. And so when we're delegates and we're trying to get something done, we're trying to find leadership in the state party chair and those are running for office that says, no, well, let's say no to everything. And get the wins we can. Because we've got to stop not only going for the home runs and trying to get the whole thing, but we got to start doing the same thing, is getting those small little wins.
And get the little wins, for sure.
And increment ourselves in there just like the left is doing. But at the same time, standing up as much as possible to everything that comes at us that has that signs of moral degradation. And I just not seeing that in very many politicians nowadays. I see it in Trevor Lee. I see it in Carrie Ann Lisenby. I see it in Rod Hall. I see it in a few others. But then there's a lot on there that are more of that, well, let's just go with the flow. Let's take it easy.
What I think is a great place to remind any Republican, but certainly candidates and elected officials, is to focus on the platform. Because there are some battles that you need to choose your battles. Is that going to just destroy the Republican brand or our ability to govern or our effectiveness in being elected? Well, it's okay to do that if it's the right thing to do, no matter what the consequences are, like you talked about. But oftentimes it's like, well, that's not really a core issue. And if you ever have a curiosity of what the core issues are in the party, in my opinion, you start with the party platform. That makes a very clear articulation, and it actually is a unifying effect that no matter what your pet issue is or my pet issue is or what your style and approach to politics are and how mine are, the thing that unifies us is that party platform. So you start there, and that's where when you have something that is moving away from the party platform piece, you need to lean in and say something. Or when you have an opportunity to promote and advocate something, if it's a party platform piece, you need to say something. You need to do something. If it's a peripheral issue, then I think you can ask more questions of, is this strategically the right thing? Or is this the best use of our time or resources? But if it's in that platform, you better stand up. You better fight for it.
What do you think are some of the top issues right now that the party you've been asked to address this coming year?
SB54, because we're going to get a lot into that.
Absolutely. There's SB54, which falls into the category of just being inherently destructive to a system of nomination that we had with delegates in our caucus convention system that really was doing a good job. So SB54 just really undermines that and throws that into chaos in ways that I think diminished good outcomes and good conversations that were occurring. And it's not that if you look our like SB54 and the delegate process, it's not like those are universal truths. We're one of the only states that still has it. But I don't know of any better vehicle to express the principles of a republic in the political process.
Agreed, but some of the
system.
contentions we've had in it recently is allowing the rest of the nation to look at us and say, see, this doesn't work.
Oh, absolutely. And
How do we
that's a
fix
big
that?
challenge. And what I would point out, some of the things that I think Utah is falling short on is our ability to have confidence in our elections. I'm not going to go so far as to say that our elections are not being done correctly in every case or every instance, but we have a bunch of inability through the law that has prevented us from having transparency. And if you can't even do an analysis with confidence to know where we're falling short and where we're successful, it doesn't matter. We could be 100% successful. If there's a question, then people have doubt. And when you start to sow doubt into our election process, that undermines this whole system of government of a constitutional republic. So I'm one who believes that the appropriate role of government, even though we should always be good stewards of tax dollars, investing the necessary amount of money to have an accurate, fair, accountable, transparent, and auditable election process is worth the time, worth the investment, worth the effort. That, I think, builds an ability for people to come together, because then if your candidate or your issue wins, you know they won fairly. And if they lose, you know they lost fairly.
You know, obviously, we had your opponent, Phil Lyman, on last week, and
Yeah.
he's accusing you of not doing enough and not
Yeah.
using those tax dollars. Let us know your side of how that worked.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, and hopefully all of the delegates that listen to this have seen in every meeting and engagement I've had, I try not to be negative towards Phil and negative towards him, because ultimately we're all two things. We're all Republicans, and we're going to do better together than dividing off into our own little tribes. And two, he and I have been friends for 11 years.
That's what he said.
And Phil and I are still friends. And life is too short to allow any type of negativity to get in the way of that. And I mean, Phil and I were texting late into the night last night, and we share book recommendations. We both drive a long ways. He drives more than I do, coming up from Blanding quite often. But we are always sharing Audible books and hey, just listen to this one. It's really good. Check it out. And he'll send me some stuff back. Again, I think the party's in a better place focusing on what we can do together. As it pertains to his race, first and foremost, I can appreciate as a candidate, you put your blood, sweat, and tears out there, fighting for what you believe in. That is exhausting. I mean, I'm doing it as a party chair. That's just a small element of what he would have had to have done as a statewide gubernatorial candidate. So I can appreciate that he had things that he really felt worked well and things that he wished had been different and everything in between. When you look at the party, though, post SB54, as you guys both know, SB54 was passed in 2014. So a little over 10 years right now that this has been the law of Utah. And the legal efforts to get that overturned did not go in the party's favor. I wish that they had. We lost those cases, and it's allowed that law to continue to be into effect. We've had 5 election cycles that have occurred for partisan office. There's then the municipal, but those are different. But we've had 5 election cycles post SB54 where you had this dual track where somebody could gain access to the ballot through signatures. Last year, when I was party chair, that's the 5th of the 5 election cycles, was the first time that the party actually leaned in and expended any resources, made any donations, provided any assistance to promote and support our convention winners. So could we do more? Well, absolutely. Let's raise more money and do more. Let's build capacity so that in the future we're doing more. But literally the high water mark before was after the convention. Thank you to all of our convention winners. Now, good luck in the primary. Last year was the first time I was the first chair who leaned into that, and we deployed $250,000 worth of resources to do this very thing. So we absolutely provided as much assistance as could be given. We promoted all of our convention winners. We were able to get a lot of them past the finish line. Incumbency and money in politics, those are very hard to overcome. Not just in Utah, but in any state. The 6 seats that ultimately went to a signature path candidate and not to the convention winner, in all 6 of those, money was, there was a massive discrepancy between the convention winner and the ultimate individual who prevailed. And in 4 of the 6, they were incumbents, and the other 2, they had some of the benefits of incumbency. But I'll point out again, we were able to overcome that in some races. And even in those that we didn't, in Phil's race, I'll bring this up as an example. 2016, you had a convention leading candidate, Jonathan Johnson, who came out of convention with the support of the delegates. Governor Herbert was the incumbent. He also qualified through the convention, but he was in second place coming out of there. And then I think he also had signatures. They go on to the primary, and even though it was a wide gap between their votes at convention, it was like 58 to 42 or something like that. You go to the primary, well, Governor Herbert then wins by 44 points, 44-point spread, massive difference. Well, last year, when the party for the first time ever actually leans in, I think we contributed to the fact that you had a convention winner who comes out of convention, and while he still came up short in the primary results, that gap and that spread was only 8 points. And there's many reasons why that was, but I think one of them was the party supporting.
But the issue was that Cox arguably did not have the signatures, and that's what Phil was asking for help on, was to make that transparent.
So and I apologize if I was missing that's what you were asking. And that's just not accurate. The party actually submitted grandma requests trying to gain access to the same information even before Phil's campaign filed those. We were trying to get clarity to that. And it gets back to that principle I was talking about before. It doesn't matter how good or bad our elections are. If we can't check the data and if there's no transparency, you don't know how good or bad it is. And so the consequence is, even if it's good, people have doubt. Well, that's no better than being in a bad place. So we don't have access to that information. We've made some progress since last summer. That's been some of my priorities in the legislative session. I spent all but 3 or 4 days up at the legislature fighting for the party and fighting against bad bills and fighting for good bills. We've made some progress. So, for example, in Utah, you have a withheld status on our voter registration. That withheld status was used as justification to redacting signature ballot petitions so that you couldn't review all of those because it was a withheld voter. And whether that's appropriately interpreted or not is somewhat left to the courts. I'm of the opinion, let's change the law. Let's take the ambiguity out of there. There shouldn't be withheld voters. There certainly shouldn't be redacted signature ballot petition signatures. That's now been changed. We were able to get that changed. So now a candidate moving forward would be able to see the signatures unredacted of any ballot petition signature packet of anybody that is in the race with them, and the party is able to now view those as well. So moving forward, we've made progress. I still wish we didn't have the signature path period, but at least we're making progress. We have to keep doing more of that because those grandma requests that Lyman's campaign filed were denied. Those grandma requests that the Republican Party filed were denied. And it just prevents giving us that transparency.
So you're saying when he asked for help, he asked for was given?
Absolutely. And in some cases, we were ahead of the game and had already done the things that he was needing to do and looking to do.
Who denied that?
It's through the elections office, and because ultimately it's through the elections office that all of this was certified.
But that's the Attorney General, right?
No, it's not the attorney general. It's
Or
the lieutenant governor.
That's
Lieutenant
what I meant,
governor.
Lieutenant governor.
Yeah.
Which is another problem.
Which
is
was the problem.
she's
Well,
over
and
her own race.
Keep in mind, that's one of the reasons that the Republican Party put forward a resolution last summer. And you even have legislative members that have these different ideas of removing the elections office responsibility outside of the office of the lieutenant governor. I think it does create conflicts that are inherently unfair to whoever holds that office and inherently unfair to the public to have
I don't
that
think
ability.
it should have ever been in part of the
I
lieutenant
don't-
governor's office.
I don't either.
I made this argument when Phil was here last week, is the Republican Party is its own entity. It should be running its own elections and then putting forth case. We as a party, this is our nominee. This is the person who's going to have an R behind their name and nobody else.
That will require some state law changes, but I would be supportive of that.
Yeah.
If you look last year,
But that's how the argument I was also making last week is because we're in such a deep red state, the legislature all of a sudden thinks they can control the Republican Party elections. If we were in a more of a swing state where it's kind of evenly on both Democrat and Republican side, I don't think we'd have so many laws coming from the legislature dictating how the Republican Party runs things, because the legislature shouldn't be dictating anything, nothing, not a single thing with what the Republican Party is or is not doing. That is up to the convention. We have our bylaws, like you said. We as delegates, we vote on what those are going to be and then how we're going to vote for our candidates.
Yeah.
Because the Republican Party is separate. And then when the government gets involved and starts taking controls, that's when things start getting messed up. And right
Very
now,
much
we're
so.
in a very, very big state of everything's messed up because the legislature has taken all the control.
and this is that SB54
Well, it's even more than
conflict
just
and,
that,
and
too.
frustration. But this is the key piece, and here's why. Last year, we had our convention on the 27th of April. Well, under state law, on the 29th of April, I had to certify the results of that process. And so if you go onto the utgop.org website, so that's our party website, utgop.org, you can go and you can actually see the certification letter that I sent on the 29th of April. And it certified those candidates who won by acclamation. It certified those candidates who advanced to a primary because two candidates received convention support. It also, we advanced Lane Bangeter and certified him as the running mate for Phil Lyman. And then the other category were those candidates. And the language is literally, these people are certified as our sole nominee according to our rules. That's what I certified. Trent Staggs, Phil Lyman, Mike Kennedy, Mike Schultz, Rod Hall. Like, there was a number of candidates. These were our sole nominees according to our party rules. That's the only race that I certified. There's been some delegates who were confused and thought that I had a role in the primary or general election. The party does not. Under
No,
state
that's
law,
the problem.
we're kept out of it. And that's where
That's
things
the
should
problem.
change.
That's the problem. I don't know how to change it because it requires a lot of things going on in the legislature to get them out of our election process. And to have government let go of power, even though
It's
they're a
very difficult.
conservative government, it's incredibly difficult because once they got it,
It's hard for
as
them to want to let it
conservative
go.
as they are, they don't want to let go.
The best way to do it, in my opinion, and this is how I've tried to conduct the last 2 years as the chair of the party, and the plan that I have in place, should I be reelected, will be to continue to do this, is to substantially grow the influence, the strength, the funding, the capacity of the party. Because right now you can only change this through litigation, which we have struck out on, and we need to be prepared to do that strategically when it makes sense, or through legislation. That's changing the law. But you made a great point. Sometimes it's against the self-interest of an incumbent to change the law if they already have the ability to win re-election. So the only way that you change this dynamic, in my opinion, is to make the party such a force. And not just a force with a big stick to threaten
gotta
them,
be the
but a
big
big
gorilla in the
carrot.
room.
It has to have a carrot. It has to have so much benefit that comes from being associated with the party that it incentivizes these people to say, hey, I'm leaning all in on that, because when I lean in on that party and supporting their platform, I have volunteers, I have donors, I have support, I have them carrying and promoting the bills that I care about. I have them taking flack for me. I have an army at my back. Well, for far too long, the party has ebbed and flowed in relevance and capacity and volunteers and funding. It's hard to muster the army to support good candidates if we don't have that ability. So That's why I'm proud of having
Well,
raised
the
the
problem we have
funds to
right
do
now
it.
is we have a lot of good people on there that would probably support what you're trying to do there. But having a carrot or a stick is not powerful enough to get something by the legislature.
It has to be a big carrot and a big stick to do that.
And the problem is we have a lot of legislatures in there right now that have all just bypassed that entire process because of SB54. And they just snub their nose at it, like Cox snubbed his nose at us the last convention. We were all pretty pissed off what he did to the conventioneers. And then there's this negativity about, I mean, I know the fight and all that kind of stuff. There's a small little snippets, but it really portrayed all of us as delegates as very, very negative in the media.
And it's incredibly unfair. You look at the delegates, 4,000 delegates. It was something like 40% of them were new for the first time as delegates. There was like a 70% turnover. So some of those had been delegates years in the past. 70% turnover, 40% new delegates. A bunch of them were new, brand new Republicans, young. You had people all across the spectrum that represented our state very well. You had a couple of people who were obnoxious and inappropriate.
You're going to find that in any group of people.
In any group of 4,000 people, you're going to have that.
Yeah. We had delegates that were Democrats who switched and registered as Republicans just in time to be voted in as delegates and cause havoc at convention.
The best way, in my opinion, to correct that is we have to revitalize our precinct level organization of the party. Because if you know your neighborhood, let's be honest, go up and down your street, you know who had the Joe Biden sign in their yard and who didn't. You can actually revitalize that by making sure that we have the strength and the camaraderie of the party.
In our precinct, the way they divided things,
Yeah.
I don't know half the people in my precinct. They put people on the other side. I live on a reservoir. So half of our precincts on the other side, we don't even know each other. We see each other every couple of years at caucus.
So I'll tell you one of the things, if I'm reelected, that we've already started the process for that I'm very excited for. And if I'm not reelected, I would encourage Phil to do this. And I'd be happy to help him do it. But getting all of the information, all of the data, all of the resources, all the way down to the precinct level. So doing it in partnership with our 29 counties, because you don't want to cut them out. That's where the rubber meets the road, is they're doing all of that work under the umbrella of the state party. But the precincts ultimately answer to them. So we work with our counties down to the precinct level. You get them the data. Imagine if you now had a list, you knew who every registered Republican was in your precinct. What I would love to start seeing, and we're going to try to help make this happen around the state, is encouraging precincts this summer, not next year in the lead up to caucus, advertising caucus. This summer, organize a picnic, organize a neighborhood barbecue, but where you're building it around the Republican members in your precinct. And it just can be as easy as getting to know one another. You start there, it starts to create those social connections that revitalizes the precinct level. If we stay consistent with that, rather than just showing up every 2 years to tell people about caucus night and seeing them for the first time in 2 years
I'm
at
going to
caucus,
talk a lot about
we
the
could do a
precinct
lot.
level, because I see there's a lot of issues at the precinct level, because I've been doing this for a very, very long
Yeah.
time. I was born and raised in Utah County. I was a delegate down there. I helped Mike Kennedy, because I was actually a med rep that
Oh, fun.
visited Mike long before he ever even ran for anything. And then I was a county delegate, and then he started visiting me because he was running for Utah Congress, and then so roles kind of reversed there. But we're in a unique situation right now where if you were to say we have a good, better, best, everybody's like that, good, better, best, we're picking between better and best right now between you and Phil. And I really like the ability to be able to pick between better and best, right?
Yeah.
Because usually we're picking between not so good and he'll do.
Yeah. Honestly, I agree. I love that some delegates are having a hard time. There's going to be some who just love Phil and maybe even despise me, and the opposite might be true. But most, they're going to be in the middle. It's like,
You both have
I don't know who to
such
pick.
Great values, great morals. You guys are so based good. I love both men. You guys are doing great. And I just love the ability to be able to pick between better and best, right? Because look at a lot of our elections. We're like, okay, he's okay, then all he'll have to do, right?
Yeah.
I hate that, because there's a lot of principles that, I support, but then there's, I don't know about some of those other things he's supporting, but that's all we've got, right?
Yeah.
So as a Republican Party, we need to be able to help also all those people that are could throw their hat in the ring that do have those morals and backgrounds and give them the bravery and the support that says, yes, I'll throw my hat in the ring. And then people like a Carrie Ann Lisenby, like a Rod Hall, like a Trevor Lee will start throwing their hat in the ring, and then we'll start getting better people in there. But when they're sitting back, they're afraid to throw their hat in the ring, or they're afraid they're just going to go through all this fundraising, all this effort, and then they're just going to get circumvented because of SB54, then why even bother? Because what SB54, and we're going to get into these articles right now, is what SB4 has done is it's made it into a popularity contest. Mm-hmm. If you got the money, if you got the name recognition.
In the top level races, I will say, again, even with SB54, the convention winners and the convention process still wins the vast, vast majority of our races. It's once you get to like a congressional race or a statewide race that it's still is hard to overcome.
It's because it's just too many people, right?
Yep. It's name ID. It's the ads on TV. It's whoever has the most money.
When you're talking about a couple hundred, 1,000 people in a city or something like that, then you can. It's easy for a low budget person to get out and kind of get their name out there and start talking to people. But when you're talking something that is statewide, which is why Mike Kennedy lost against Mitt Romney. It wasn't because Mitt Romney was a better candidate. He had the name recognition, and he had the name.
Think between the Olympics, running for governor, and running for president, he had like literally a few $1 billion had been spent building his name ID.
That's hard to overcome. You can't overcome that, which is why the caucus system is so important. Mm-hmm. So important. And there's a lot of people out trying to get rid of it. So if we go to this first article here, you got a lot of people attacking the caucus system. And that's what I want to kind of talk about here in the next few minutes is everybody's trying to get rid of it, right? Because they know that if they get rid of it, it's getting rid of a lot of our freedoms.
Yep.
Right here, you got Senator Daniel Thatcher from West Valley.
Bicameral. So it had Senate and House members in the legislature.
The cabinet. Bicameral Government Operations Interim Committee intended to have the committee listen to the critics of the state GOP's decision to combine the primary nomination process with the neighborhood caucus system. And I think that's a horrible idea. You shouldn't be combining the caucus system with the neighborhood system. And then you got people like, this woman who wrote this one here in the Deseret News. As parents of young kids, my peers and I care deeply about the state of politics and how policies will shape our children's future. And she goes on to say that only 9% of Republican or registered voters even participated in the caucus. I can't find a babysitter. We can't do this on caucus night. We can't even do it on 16 hours of convention day.
That exactly proves the point why the caucus system works. So I don't understand that, because if you don't have to, if you're in the point in your life where you don't have time to do that, that's why you're going to elect somebody who will take the time to vet the candidates and knows how to vet people, instead of just being the mom at home that says, I saw this one on the news the most.
Yeah, I saw a 30-second ad, so I'll vote for that one.
Watching, Utah Housewives, that's the commercial I saw the most. That must be the best, and that's what TikTok
and that's what it comes
said.
Down to is I saw the commercials more often than somebody else's. But it's the sob story that's behind this that upsets me, because, again, it's the narrative. We talked a lot about this with Phil Lyman last week, is they love controlling that narrative, giving some sob story out there that just tears at your heartstrings and makes you think, oh, we're doing this completely wrong because we're taking out mothers that have kids and they can't get involved in the voting process. And this is a horrible narrative. Nobody should believe this narrative that I can't find a babysitter and I can't do this and I can't be involved, and you're taking away our rights because we're not involved in the voter process. Get involved in the caucus system, because the whole point of the caucus system, I want everybody to understand that the whole point of the caucus system was you get together as your neighborhood. You should know each other, trust each other, and know what each other espouse. People stand up there and say, this is what I espouse, this is what my values are, and then everybody says, okay, we have like values, we have like principles. If you're going to dedicate your time as a delegate, you're going to go out and you're going to really research everything about these individuals, all the key points, everything, and you're going to dig into this and find out, okay, who should be on the ballot. We're not taking voter rights away from anybody. We're not eliminating 1 million people because with 4,000 delegates, and we're not representing the voter base of the entire Utah with the 4,000 delegates, which is down here a couple paragraphs where she says it's not even close to representing the Utah voter base. But when you have people that dedicate so much time as we dedicate to discussing the topics, researching the candidates, and we go and talk to the candidates one-on-one, and we really kind of drill into them. We ask them really hard questions, which is why they come out to all these little meetings, and they go from library to library, school to school, and we go out and revisit them multiple times. I don't think the general public knows how much the delegates get out.
Countless hours of effort.
Countless hours and get out there, and we talk to these candidates so often and really kind of drill down those principles, so that when we do get to convention, we're kind of know, okay, we know the real people that have those morals and values that we want to have in office. And when you take that away, and then you just go to a popularity contest, then it's like Ingrid says here, all of a sudden now it's
whoever had the most likes on TikTok or
had the most commercials on TV and had
they were on The View, so they must be good.
How many signs they had on the freeway, and it just
low information.
And you don't know what you don't know.
And I'm not trying to mock the common voter out there, but there's a reason why the caucus system narrows it down to a certain group of people and says, okay, these are the people that should be on the ballot. We went through a solid, hard, rough vetting process because, again, I don't think the general public knows how rough it is to get the support of delegates because
a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of hard questions.
We're not, we're not mean, but we're not pushovers either. We know what we want to see in a candidate. And I think that gets lost in translation a lot. And you get news articles like this where all of a sudden, again, this whole article is meant to pull at the heartstrings.
It promotes a narrative that's not true in many instances. And the actual participation was closer to 12%. It wasn't 9%. But could we improve? Absolutely. We should always be looking to improve. But ultimately, I also think the narrative should be changed in the state. And we should have conversations in schools. We should actually have conversations in the workplace and realize that the caucus system is something, 2 hours of time, maybe 3 hours of time, once every 2 years.
Yeah.
That's too much. This country that gives you all the freedoms in the world, this country that is better than anywhere else to raise a family, this state that is as phenomenal as it is, and you're telling me that 2 to 3 hours of time to attend a caucus once every 2 years is problematic. A lot of people in this state went to church for 3 hours every Sunday for a long time.
Amen.
And you're having a hard time with 2 to 3 hours every 2 years. I think we should expect more.
Well, it's in the middle of homework time and music time, and she lists off everything. And sports time, I'm like...
That's the point. Sports. So how many club teams, how many tutors, how many training experiences, how many bands, like
dance
competitions. Those are all phenomenal. My kids are involved in those too. Those are all phenomenal. But I would challenge any parent who wants to raise a child who can be successful in this world and successful in this life to also ask themselves, maybe should I be sprinkling in a little bit of civic participation so that they could be good citizens in the world?
Maybe I should find out exactly what they're putting in my schools, what they're putting in the libraries, who's running the school boards, who's making the laws. Because if your kids are that important, you're taking them to all these things, their future is really dependent. The majority of their future is dependent on who's in office and who's going to be in office and what changes they're making. Because like SB54, it's now affected us for the last 10 years. Mm-hmm. Yep. That's a lot of effect for not spending a couple hours in a caucus to try to combat that.
Yep.
So
I agree.
I just don't see any excuses with this at all. I mean, I've got kids and I've been doing this for years when they're young, and I've made arrangements with my wife or my parents or something like that. You have to get past the story here, the sob story, because that's all it was. It's a narrative.
Yep.
Don't believe a word on these articles. That's all it was a narrative. Get past that and actually find out, okay, what is their end goal? What do they really want to do? It's not their goal is not getting a bigger voter participation throughout the state of Utah, which is what they're saying they want to do, is increase the voter participation. It's not to involve more people in the process. That's not their goal. This whole sob story, the only goal is to get rid of the caucus system.
Yep.
That's
exactly
the sole
right.
goal.
Yep.
Read past the narrative, find out what do they really want, and it's to get rid of the caucus system. Why? Because if you can get rid of the caucus system, then you lose complete control. They can get anybody they want into office at that point.
Well, and closing down accountability and access to our elected officials serves a purpose for those that want to not have to deal with that big question mark of where will the people be. But we're the sovereign. The people are the point of all of our system of government. So anytime you're trying to limit or close off the participation of the people who actually are represented by these folks, I think that's a slippery slope that has no justification. We should be embracing this dialogue, this accountability, this feedback loop that we have through the delegate process, which is just an absolute benefit.
And the delegate process takes the money out of it. It takes them out because it doesn't matter if I'm a billionaire running for office or my next door neighbor doesn't have $50,000 in the bank account, right?
Yep.
Doesn't matter. I can go to the same libraries, I can go to the same schools, and I can talk to the same delegates.
Yep.
I can get vetted
Your
by the same
vote is
delegates.
the same vote.
The same
Yep.
vote. It takes the money out of it. It takes a popularity contest out of it. And the only thing that's left is, what do you stand for? What are your morals and values? What are you going to put out there? And then you let the delegates decide, right? Because if it's a signature thing and you're going to go through this whole primary process where people can just throw millions of dollars at it, like our presidential elections where it takes $1 billion just to get yourself elected, that is insane, and it should never be like that because you got to take the popularity contest out of it. You got to take the money out of it because the money corrupts. It creates corrupt elections. There's so much room in there for stolen elections because of how much money is in there.
Well, and it's an inverse incentive away from just of and for the people, which was the whole point of our system of government, is to disperse power and authority to the people.
Well,
that
you
are
allow
represented.
bias in everything, right? We saw that in Trump's election. You saw the bias in the social media networks where until Elon took X, there was a huge bias on X where they were, and Facebook and Google were all suppressing anything and everything to do with Trump. You saw all the major networks, as we all know, the fake news out there that are
It even happens here in Utah.
96, 98% negative against him.
It's all in Utah. All these
Yeah.
articles that you read.
This is what's happening.
When you give your elections up to social media and media bias, you're going to have a corrupt election. That's just what's going to happen. When you keep it at the delegate side of it, where delegates are visiting the candidates in person, talking to them in person, it's nothing but honesty there. You can't bias that. You can't worm your way out of the questions. You can't throw money at it and just think you're going to win it. That's why the caucus system is probably the most honest system, the most trustworthy system that's out there.
It's the best system that I'm aware of anywhere in the country, hands down.
And everybody's trying to get rid of it here.
So what are our chances of getting rid of it? What's the plan?
Well, I would have to say, what's the fight you're seeing right now from people trying to get rid of the caucus system?
So how to push back against these people that want the caucus to be destroyed is you have to build that behemoth. When you have almost nearly universal negative reporting that comes, like we've talked about, and even when there's a quote unquote fair article, it's already slanted and kind of caged in a way that is prejudicial. When that's already happening, you have to build the capacity of the party so that you have the funding and you have the system to overcome that, to push back not only against the media. I had to do that last year against KSL. They were KSL Radio was incredibly inappropriate with an editorialized reporting, and they then put out they said something on the radio, they pushed something out on social media that was just factually not true and so biased. And so I had to
They
address that
reported what
publicly.
happened at convention bias.
Oh, absolutely they did.
I was there.
Yep. And it's like, that's
You're like,
not how
that's
it
not
played out.
exactly how it went. Yeah.
And so, yeah, you have to push back against that. But then beyond that, you have to build an apparatus within the party that can overcome it. And what I mean by that is you have to build the structure, the mechanism to deliver information that actually ignores the traditional media. Not that you can ignore it completely, but you can provide that counter argument. And right now in this country, I mean, look at what we're doing right now. There is this opportunity that we've had the last 10, 15 years that is just vibrant in giving information. I remember my parents talked about growing up and everybody listened to Walter Cronkite. Like, that was before my day, but everybody listened to one guy. When like the three of us were growing up, it was Peter Jennings and Dan Rather and Tom Brokaw. We had three. That's what you listened to. That's where you got your information. Well, nowadays, people are getting more information from Joe Rogan than they are from any unnamed national news outlet. And so we have this massive opportunity. If you build a party apparatus that is structured and organized all the way down to the precinct level, while building the funding and the systems necessary to have the data, the emails, the contact information for our members, and the funding necessary to push out information and training and counter narratives when we're being attacked, we can actually get to a place where we have far deeper and more meaningful reach than what the media has. We just have to build that apparatus. I'm committed to doing all I can.
I've heard a lot of praise for your fundraising.
And fundraising is important, not because that's the goal,
Right.
but it's the vehicle. Every good goal in the party costs money. You want to do our own elections? Costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
You want to communicate to young people and bring them into the party? Costs money. If you want to go and help our convention winners like we did, I mean, like I said, we went from nothing to last year under my chairmanship, we did $250,000. Well, not only did I deploy the $250,000 to do that, I raised the $250,000 to do that. Imagine if we raise more. So money is the vehicle to do all of the good work. It can't be the end goal. But you can't do any of it without money. So yes, we have a new high water mark. I've raised $3 million over the last 2 years, definitely more than has ever been done. But I hope that we're just scratching the surface. Let's get to a place where nobody wants to come and report anything against the party that they don't know, that they've checked or dotted every I and crossed every T to be fair. Because if they are not being fair, that suddenly like the weight and strength of the party is coming down on them. Right now, they know that they can get away with it and pushing sometimes very skewed and biased information.
And that's what Uri and I are trying to do, is to be able to reach as many people as we can to give facts and truth. And if we're wrong, we'll own up to that.
But these long form conversations are so meaningful.
Well, that's the only way to do it is this way, because this is where the truth gets out. I mean, this is unfettered,
you can't fake
unbiased. You can't fake this.
Yep.
You can't fake it. I'm going to read a couple things here too and get your opinion on them. So this is one of the articles, and it says, to this day, caucus supporters continue to argue that SB54 has empowered money-driven politicking, signature gathering, takes a lot of resources and money. They argue so it is giving an unfair advantage to candidates flush with campaign cash. And I completely agree with that. That's our argument, right?
That is a fair argument.
That's a fair argument. So in 2016, Herbert gathered signatures, another source of delegate anger. That year, SB54 sponsors Senator Kurt Bramble, which we all have a problem with, defended the legislation as necessary, arguing had it not been for SB54 compromise, which preserved both paths to the primary, the group Count My Vote would have likely succeeded in ballot initiative to eliminate convention in favor of open primaries. Bramble, who's retiring in December, made the same argument again this year, a decade later, telling the Salt Lake Tribune during the convention he was tired of the revisionist history from delegates who are still complaining about SB 54. It was clear to me and the legislature that initiative would pass and do away with the convention system entirely. He told the outlet, we wanted to preserve the caucus system, and this was the only way to do that. Is that true? Was Count My Vote at the verge of getting rid of the caucus system, and that's why he had to pass SB54?
They were certainly at the verge of engaging in their ballot initiative. Now, should they have been able to cross that threshold of getting the requisite number of signatures to get it on the ballot and then the support to then pass it from the ballot? I don't know. We would have to go and see it in an alternate reality to see if that would have played out. That certainly would have also ended up in a legal challenge from the Republican Party. And I'd be curious to see, had we ended up in that scenario, if the same decision against the party would have happened when the state was the one inflicting it. In some ways, and in some conversations I've had with a number of very competent, well-regarded, famous attorneys that are specifically First Amendment and constitutional attorneys and have experience litigating into the Supreme Court, they actually think that the case of validating SB54, where it came from the state, was a more difficult case for the party than had we been litigating against a ballot initiative. And so, again, we will never know how it would have played out. But I think it's worth always being willing to look at the criticism. And so there was criticism coming from folks that supported Count My Vote of, like you said, broader participation. They wanted more primaries. Okay, let's look at that criticism. What I would invite people to do is, instead of like having a solution looking for a problem, that you come and try to upend everything, lean in and help us build something. If you want the party to be more impactful, lean in and help us build it instead of coming in and just attacking it from the outside. I think that would have been a more sincere effort. But absolutely, we have to be at least cognizant of outside groups and funding that do want to change Utah's laws through ballot initiative, whether it's Count My Vote or any other organization. Unfortunately, now with the, in my opinion, radical decisions that came from the Utah Supreme Court last year, reinterpreting the Utah Constitution, we now have a target on our head in Utah where outside money, even outside the country, or the country money, like foreign money, to come and be invested into pushing ballot initiatives and changing our laws. Can you imagine? We literally in Utah can have Chinese sourced funding coming in to change our laws. Like, how is that justifiable by the Utah Supreme Court? Yet they came to that bizarre conclusion.
I don't know how any of this is going. But again, going back to this, I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't necessarily believe a word that Bramble said here. He's putting the entire blame, though. I had to pass SB 54 because if we hadn't done that, if we hadn't come up with this compromise, convention system, the caucus system was gone. And I don't believe that, because what Count My Vote wanted was SB 54. That's what they wanted. They got exactly what they wanted.
Yeah, it is interesting when you have what is supposed to be like a negotiated compromise that really ultimately gives everything to the person that was fighting you in the first place. It definitely kind of leads you scratching your head.
So how did he save the caucus system when he virtually just nulled and voided it, essentially, because everybody in the wants to can now bypass it?
He maybe had great intentions. I don't know where his heart was, and maybe he sincerely believed that he was trying to rescue it. I think that is somewhat at this point irrelevant. What I think is relevant is the fact that we've now for 14 years had the party impacted and substantially hamstrung by this process, and it's created a mechanism where money in politics has suddenly mattered a lot more.
Money is it, because that's all that matters now, because of that. I mean, look how they paint us as delegates here. I find this kind of hilarious. Mad about gun control, mad about wilderness, mad at long-term incumbency, mad. The Desert News wrote about the 2000 GOP state delegates. At the time Democrat Bill Clinton was in the Oval Office, this year many Utah Republican delegates were again mad, furious with SB 54 still. They had to put the word still in there. Like we're supposed to just accept it, right? It's
wait long enough and suddenly your opinion should change.
That's my whole point, is they like these little sidesteps and just let it settle. But it's not settling on this one, right? Why are you still upset about that? It's a law. Get over it. No.
I think that's like a neighbor squatting on your property and then waiting 5 years and you're still upset that they're using your property and be like, whoa, but it's been 5 years. Why do you care? Well, no, it's still wrong. Give me that back.
Yeah. They're so mad. They want to fight, not negotiate or compromise. Hence why some of them booed Representative Blake Moore. We booed Cox this last time, who's a proponent of the bipartisanship, not disagree better. Cox's campaign with the National Association of Governors meant to discourage hyperpartisanship, tribalism, and other issues sowing political hatred and threatening U.S. democracy, Cox has said. So now the delegates, because we're so mad, we're threatening democracy because we
Do you
don't know
remember
how
why
to
the booing started?
disagree better.
There were
Go ahead.
delegates, these two older gentlemen, asking the question, where did the money go? Where did the money go, that $1 billion that was given for COVID? Where's the accountability? And he just wouldn't answer them. He'd say something else. And they kept asking and they kept asking. And that's when the first booing started, is they were like, you're not answering to your delegates. That's where it started. But they didn't cover that part.
No.
Well,
But they're all
And then
calling
one
us-
of his guys was up there swearing at us.
yeah, I'll tell you, I'm not a big fan of booing myself. I get people have the right to do what they want to do. I would rather have hard conversations. And if somebody says something during their speech, then their speaking time, and you dislike it, vote some other way. People can do what they want. I just don't think that booing accomplishes enough, but I understand why there's the motivation at times to be booed or to boo. And specifically, and it's not any one candidate's fault or one elected official, but they can add to this. How many times have we, over the last number of years during COVID, all growing up, are we ignored? Like, there's not enough listening. And this is one of the things that I think was actually the difference maker for Donald Trump. Donald Trump has always had wealth. I haven't. Maybe none of us have, right? Like, maybe you come into money, but like you've worked for it. Donald Trump, he certainly worked for it, but he has always had a very privileged upbringing and experience. And yet he connected with people all across the socioeconomic ladder in this country because he was authentic, sincere, and he listened. I wish that we had more listening, because when there's not listening coming from the people that want to represent us, or the agency or the government or the state government or local government, when you feel like you're not being heard, of course we're going to get to this place where we're agitated, or as the reporting said, we're angry or booing because we're not being heard. So to anybody that wants to see less of that, do more listening. Listen to people.
Oh, well, not all we were not being heard, but every single one of us there at the campaign knew that it didn't matter. He was going to circumvent us anyway, and he knew it. He knew it before he even walked into that convention.
Yeah, no,
was
that's the
frustrating,
challenge
and
of the signature
delegates are-
path.
We knew
Delegates
that
are
it didn't matter.
human.
Our vote wasn't going to matter there. He was going to be
And
on
then,
the ballot.
but then they got up there and baited. It was really well done.
Yeah, again, when you're doing any of that, there's not listening. And that's what I want to see more of. And I want to see the party being a facilitator of that. And that's what the caucus convention system
It's supposed to do.
inherently does, is it provides a forum that listening is required.
Yeah.
The only way to survive going through the caucus convention system is to listen. And so you get away from that. If you're just pushing out like campaign ads, you don't have to listen to anybody. You get to pay, like cut the check, do the recording, and then go about your day. And the ads go and they play on TV. You're never listening to somebody. The caucus convention system, listen,
I like
listen,
that.
listen.
Well, the problem we have in this state, and I pointed this out last week, is the general election really doesn't matter, because if you are Republican, you're going to get in office, right? We're heavily Republican
In most of the state.
So then the main election that means a lot, like I said last week, unless you're downtown Salt Lake and you're running for mayor.
Salt Lake County is a rough one. Ogden was a rough one, though we won that seat back. The last
Yeah.
legislative seat outside of Salt Lake County that was held by the Democrats, that was a big target for me this last year, was to make this the Democrat Party here in Utah, at least on the legislative front, a Salt Lake County problem rather than anywhere else in the state. So we won that seat in Ogden. That was a big win. Jill Coford was elected to that.
Unless you're
Yeah,
downtown
yeah.
Salt Lake. So, I mean, the primary is what really matters. And then you get news articles where people were saying that we don't get to participate enough. And yet those are the very people that don't show up for the primary elections, right? They don't show up. And then those that do show up, again, it's just who did they see most often? Whose money did they see it? And Cox knew that going in, that he could outspend Lyman 10 times over, and that's what was going to win. And he
Money's a big issue.
He knew that going into it, and money is corruption. That's just what it is. And when you look at this one right here, again, another article, I don't necessarily know if we want to believe it or not, but GOP party loyalists have fought for years, which you guys have, in trying to get rid of SB54. But the law was meant to preserve Utah's convention process in the face of ballot initiative. Again, I don't believe a word of that. It wasn't meant to preserve it. It's meant to get rid of it. You can't believe the narrative. You just can't. A decade later, here's why SB54's architect wishes he never stepped in. So you skip down, and right here in big letters, it says, Bramble's regret. The law passed during the 2014 session solidified Utah's dual nominating path to primary. Candidates can either get their names on the ballot by winning 60% from party delegates or by gathering signatures. 28,000 signatures. You go down a little bit further. But the angst over SB 54 persists, and it was one factor that further divided Utah Republicans during last year's bitter gubernatorial race. And then he goes through and describes the Phil Lyman and Cox debate. Then you go down to what he says. Look, if I could go back and undo history, I never would have ran SB 54, Bramble said Wednesday. In an interview after Wednesday's panel, Bramble told Utah News Dispatch that in 2014, he believed preserving the caucus system was a worthy objective because I'd been a product of that for 4 years. But now in hindsight, seeing the party's response to that, instead of embracing it, which I don't know how he thought we were going to embrace SB 54 in the first place, instead of embracing it, recognizing that qualified signature gathering candidates had 28,000 Republicans ready to support this statewide candidate, the party has said, if you get signatures, you're not a Republican, which is exactly what all the delegates are saying. Bramble said now the issue has become a flashpoint issue for the party with a multiple county parties drawing up bylaw proposals to oppose and restrict signature gathering candidates from using party resources. I didn't foresee SB 54 being a wedge that would divide the Republican Party, Bramble said. And he goes on, the strength of our system, the voice of the people, polling is not the voice of the people. The ultimate poll is the ballot. I would have let the outcome of the ballot question be the law of the land. And he still insists that the count my vote would have made it to the ballot and would have gotten rid of the caucus system with the general vote. I don't think that. I think he's trying to repaint a picture and trying to make himself look better, but because SB 54 was everything that Count My Vote wanted. They wanted to get rid of the caucus system, and now he's trying to repaint that and make it look a little more rosy than it was. And I think it's all a farce. It's all a lie.
Yeah, I would recommend to any state delegate and to the two of you guys, go and read the court decision when we lost the case in the federal courts. It was a 2-1 decision, so it was a panel of 3 of the judges there at the federal courts.
And remind everybody which...
So this was
in...
what, 8 years ago?
No, but which district was that in? It was a...
Oh, which one was it?
It wasn't 9th.
No.
Nobody likes the 9th.
I'm going to say it wrong, so I don't even want to say it. I'll have to look it up.
We can put a link.
Yeah, if you want to put a link, if you don't mind putting a link. But there was the dissenting opinion, and it was actually the senior most judge in that court. But it was a 2-1 decision, and in his opinion, he actually laid out that the structure and why he found this law to be problematic was that in its very nature, it was going to create conflict and divide a private organization. And he goes into it and lays it out in a number of pages. I mean, it's really good information and good stuff. And you look, and he was prophetic. It's done that very thing. SB 54 has become a wedge issue. It's become divisive. It has separated us from being able to be unified in many ways of fighting for what we need to fight for. And so that's one of, added to the list of reasons why SB 54 has been something that should never have happened and that I wish had never happened because of how it's undermined our party and our ability to do what is our right.
It's really divided everybody in there. And there's for and against. I mean, again, we're going to blow through these articles here. But on this article, after primaries, Utah's caucus convention system again under scrutiny. I don't know why they keep saying it's again under scrutiny, like we've done something evil and wrong.
Yeah, that we should be ashamed of.
We should be ashamed. We've never been under scrutiny. It's never been under scrutiny. It's a narrative that they're purposely trying to create, and I can't stand these narratives because you got to see past it.
Yep.
Someone's getting paid to write this. That's, again, their only goal is to get rid of the caucus system, which is the only.
Well, and clickbait. This is fun to have a bunch of angry articles that are written that try to get people clicking and reading and inflamed, because that drives their mechanism, and the media content, like how much of it is driven just for views, and that's how they fund their system.
Yeah, and then you got a couple quotes from Cox that I'm not going to go through here, but the negativity behind this. This year's Republican presidential caucus only had an estimated 9% voter turnout.
Again, it was closer to 12% that participated in caucus. Some decided not to actually vote in the presidential preference poll, but that is your expression as well. If you decide you're not going to vote, like you're filling out your ballot and you don't want to vote in a race, that's your decision. You have the right to decide. Yeah. If you wanted to come to caucus and you didn't want to vote in the presidential preference poll, that was your decision.
That was your decision. You didn't make it out there. And some neighborhood precinct meetings on the Wasatch Front were plagued by long lines, delays, and confusion over the process, which, again, was a lie. I mean, I went to my precinct, my son went to his precinct, my sister went, and there was, like, nobody there.
So I'll tell you, the vast majority of the state.
People just weren't showing up.
Vast majority of the state, it went very smooth. There were some locations, mainly in Salt Lake County, a couple in Davis, a couple in Utah County, that had too many people there. And that was more a logistical thing that now we've learned from, like in those counties, the individual counties actually execute caucus night. They now need to plan. It's like, oh, we probably should have fewer precincts at any one school. And I'll tell you, where I went to caucus night was one of the locations that, what did they say, plagued by problems or something like that. I was at one of those locations. Even with the delay, even with the frustration and the large crowds, you want to know how long if somebody showed up before they were out the door? It was less than 3 hours. So it gets back to my point before. 2 to 3 hours once every 2 years. That's so hard to ask. Now, we need to do better. And if in those locations it didn't go well, that was a bad experience for some people. Let's fix that. Let's learn from it. But again, even the bad experience was under 3 hours. But
I don't know how they don't have patience with these things. These people sitting behind the desk checking you in are not getting paid. They're all volunteers.
A volunteer organization.
So get off your high horse and quit complaining. If you think it took too long, get behind the desk and start helping on the next one, right?
Yep.
We could always use more volunteers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the other thing I saw, because I was in several of these, and I get a lot of people go in there and they have to check in, prove that they're a registered voter, registered Republican. Well, I didn't know how to do this. I didn't know how to bring ID. I'm like, it's an election.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to.
We believe in voter ID. We believe in verifying your eligibility.
Exactly.
And I'll tell you that pre-registration.
And not only that, but that you are a registered Republican. Because like you were just saying, there's a lot of Democrats interweaving. I saw that because I'm a county delegate as well as a state delegate.
Nice.
And I was calling on behalf of our county commissioner, and there's a lot of county delegates that I know for a fact are Democrat.
Yeah.
And somehow they got into office and just got themselves voted in there. I know for a fact. And people just going, oh, you'll work, because they just want to leave and get out, right?
Yeah. And
they just vote whoever in there. You got to have patience once because they're volunteers, and you go out and go in there, and you got to prove that you're a Republican, and because this is something that counts. And if you're going to go on there all hot and heavy, then why are you there in the first place?
Yeah.
I mean, are you there to help support society and get our future leaders in there? Or are you there just to cause problems? If you want to be really there and help your kids' future out, make sure we're going in the right direction and all that, then you need to go in there understanding that it's all volunteer organization. Yep. You do have to prove who you are.
Well, prove who you are, and think about this. I'll use a football analogy here. You don't let Kyle Whittingham call the plays for Kalani Sitake on what he's going to run. Pick your team. If you believe in the Republican Party platform, come and play ball with us and grow this party. If you believe in the Democrat Party or another party, go play there. Go play for that team. Be successful on that team. I think it's reprehensible if your entire strategic play is to just undermine somebody else. Let's let the facts speak for themselves. The argument of ideas prevail and win the day. If you believe so much to be voting in a way that represents another party, well, have pride enough in what you believe that you'll put the label on yourself rather than portraying yourself as something else.
Well, when you get to such a red state as ours, there's a lot in the left that know for a fact that Democrats aren't going to get anywhere in this state ever, or in Idaho, or in other really, really red states. And so they try to purposely infiltrate and swing us towards the middle.
And I get why they do it. I'm just personally of the opinion, stand for what you believe in and be proud of what you believe in, even if you have to stand alone. I think the world would be a far more positive place, and we would get to better outcomes if people were willing to do that.
But the rest of us got to understand that that's happening.
Yeah, and you have to work against it.
We need to be more involved, which means all this complaining is not going to get you anywhere.
Yep.
You got to be involved. You got to understand that this is happening, that we will swing left. We will swing to the middle if you don't get involved. If you don't look 100%. Past 3 hours once every 2 years and get the right people to become delegates and make sure they're the right people. You're not putting some wolf in sheep's clothing out there that's a Democrat just because you want to go home. And I saw that in a few of the districts that who wants to go in there? Okay, you're good. I just want to go home, right? Yeah. And that's just not how it works. You got to put the right people in there. Just because someone stands up there and says all the right platitudes, right, and you want to be done and want to go home, that matters, because that delegate's going to go now make decisions that are going to affect.
That represent you. Totally.
That's going to affect who's running for office, who's going to affect who gets into office, who's going to affect everything. So
this is where the more that we reorganize, or not reorganize, but revitalize our precincts and really put a lot of energy into organization there, it will be a lot harder for people to sneak through and for people to be disgruntled. Because if you're showing up and you don't know anybody, then every 10 minutes it feels like 20. But if you're showing up and it's like, hey, we had that barbecue last summer and we did this activity during the holidays. These are now friends. These are your neighbors. These are your community. I think it will be easier to actually get to the substance of what you're trying to do, and also see people where it's like, oh, here's Jill here. Love Jill. Her politics are wrong. Thanks for being here, Jill, but there's no way we're sending you as a state delegate. You don't represent us.
You have to care.
That's okay.
You have to care, and you have to go there caring.
Yep. Not
being impatient. And I think that's a problem is go there for the 2 or 3 hours that it takes and just be patient with the process. It's going to mean a lot for the next 10 years.
Yep.
Care. Put some feeling. I care about my country. I care about my community. Care.
Yep.
And if you care, the impatience goes out the window. Here it has a quote coming from you, too. It says, Robert Axson, chair of the Utah Republican Party, said that while this year's convention might not have run perfectly, which I don't think it was that unperfect, the system did what it was meant to do, give voters a chance to meet candidates and give upstart candidates a chance to compete before money comes into play, which I love that comment. If there's no relationship aside from paying for a TV and then expecting voters to vote for you, then it's hard to believe you will be connected to the people. And that's a direct quote from you.
Yep, and I still believe it. I wholeheartedly
believe that. If you got to take money out of it.
Yep, and you look, even last year's convention, and anybody who's a state delegate that was a state delegate last year, they know that the convention was a marathon. It was a long day. But it was an inspiring day. I'll say, even with some of the challenges that the venue was not the right venue. We've now fixed the process so that we can pick the right venue. When I came in as chair, that was the only space available in the state of Utah. We've now changed our rules. We can go 4 years in advance so we can get the right venue. So we've made some adjustments so that we wouldn't have that. But even had every piece of last year's convention run exactly how we planned, it still would have been a long day because we had so many candidates, so many races, so many rounds of voting. And so instead of being disgruntled and ashamed of that, we had
to wind it down. There was 10 people in one of those runs, and you had to wind that down.
I remember there was one time where I don't think we eliminated anybody because it was like a tie or something. It went a long time. But think about this. Like, there were times in this world's history and in this country's history where freedom was fought for with a musket in your hand. You got to fight for it with a ballot in your hand last year, and it took a day. It wasn't
But even
3 years.
even then,
fighting
as
a
long
war.
as the day was a 16-hour day, we got out of the well after midnight. We're delegates. We're proud to be
That's
there.
what you stepped up for.
You showed a lot of us were getting impatient and tired, but not a single one of them was going to walk out that door without their voices being heard. Not a single one of them.
Yeah, the
And
amount
that's the
of
difference
delegates that stayed the
between-
whole time was phenomenal.
That's the difference between the caucus system and general public. Because again, general public, that was a good spot.
Yeah.
I'll vote for that guy.
Or they show up and it's like, oh, I have to wait in line for 20 minutes to vote. I guess I'm just going to go home. Are you kidding me? You're
Or
right
they-
to vote. Give it 20 minutes. Give it an hour. Do what you need
I
to
know
do.
people have gone to the ballot. I don't know any of these people. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, right? Check the box and go in on the primary, right? Because
Yeah.
they got an R behind their name. I heard that name on the news.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And that's how they vote. And it's frustrating. So with SB54 in place, you got the signature system. Is there anything that the Republican Party do that can prevent signatures from getting the R behind their name?
Not right now, because that is completely dictated to us by state law. And so that gets to the place that you either litigate or you legislate to change the law. So you would have to completely restructure things. There's a number of things that we
I
could
think
do.
if you get signatures, then put an I behind your name. But
And that's what they do in some states. They have different mechanisms for that. Right now, under Utah state law, that we don't have any control over, the R or D or L next to your name is completely dictated to a process that is outside of our control. So that would require a law change, but I think it's worth
I'm glad you
considering.
said that, because on the, there's delegate pages,
Yeah.
on social media where we share information.
Yeah.
And there are some people that are pretty angry, and they have blamed you, saying,
Yeah.
why did he let them have an R? But
Yeah,
and
that
so I'm
is
glad you
100%
clarified.
dictated by state law. The party has no control over the ballot, and in
why
fact,
don't we have the control? How did the legislature get that so much power
So-
over the party?
well, part of it we have to realize in federal law and in state laws, elections are actually a purview of the state. Now, parties get the ability to put forward their nominees, and through the years, it's ended up being a very beneficial process where there's been deference given to parties on who their nominees are. But ultimately, the state does have control of that. So the case is not how dare they run ballots and print the ballots and have all
No,
of that.
that's not what I'm saying. But
But
how
we-
do they dictate who represents the party? Because the party should say who represents the party, not.
Correct, but that's my point is in SB54, there's the signature path that everybody realizes. There's another part of SB54 that most people are not aware of, even a number of delegates, is it specifically says that the party has to abide by the outcome of the primary election, regardless of how that individual qualified for the ballot.
Yeah, that's the part that would kill you.
So that's what state law is, and we are required to abide by state law. Even our party constitution, Article 1, Section B, it gives the general purposes of the party. Purpose 1 is to nominate and elect Republican candidates in partisan office. General purpose number 2 is to promote our principles as laid out in the party platform. Purpose 3 is to interact with the state and abide by state election law. We have to abide by state election law. Do I like the law? No. Do I want it changed? Absolutely. But when the law says what the law says and the courts have let that stand, we are in a difficult position and we can't just ignore that law. Again, the only thing that I had authority over, the only time that I certified anything, I certified the results of our convention. And from the convention all the way to the primary, I wholeheartedly leaned into promoting and advancing our convention winners.
I have a vague memory, though, of somebody trying to put forth an initiative that that on the ballot it would say this was the party nominee. The other one's just stating he's a registered Republican.
That would be an endorsing function, and that too would require a state law change. But that's something that I really do think that we should consider, especially if SB54 is not repealed. We should look at a way that on the ballot it distinguishes, and people can still vote however they
Put
want
on
to
the
vote.
ballot party nominee and the other one just Republican.
Vote,
right?
Yeah.
vote however you want to vote. You can vote for whomever. But imagine just the fact that the delegates have put in so much quality time and they've done this service to the state. Anything that we can do to inform the broader electorate of their decision, that should be a meaningful data point that goes into weighing how you're going to vote.
Yeah, because the only thing the public knew about the convention was the negative news.
The negative news, or then what they heard from the various campaigns, or what they heard from the party leaning in for the first time and, and
look
trying to
at
close that
this
gap.
one. This is from ABC4, Some Utah Republicans sound off against caucus system after a chaotic Super Tuesday, right? Multiple voters replied to McHale's poll calling the caucus process a bad idea, that they would never do it again. Another voter called it a total debacle, utterly pathetic. Use of one of this was one of those who sounded off online calling the event not the best of ideas. So again, they're just attack the caucus, attack the caucus, attack the caucus. Let's get rid of the caucus. And I think it was this guy that sent out a mass text to all the voters saying that the election was canceled.
Yeah, he engaged in my opinion, he engaged in election fraud.
That is election fraud.
I think he is reprehensible in what he did.
And he wasn't prosecuted for that. You can't bring him up on that.
I can't comment on that. I can't comment on that.
Oh, I hope it's in process, because that is election fraud. When he sent out a poll telling everybody that the election was canceled. I mean, that's just...
While portraying himself with...
any type of authority.
Well, it goes even one step worse and further. He actually was impersonating the party. And so it appeared as though the party was informing people of canceling caucus or something. And interestingly enough, this same group and the same individual then after the fact says, oh, look, they didn't have a good turnout, or he made all these criticisms. It's like, you spent how many tens of thousands of dollars engaged in portraying yourself as the party to sow misinformation, and now you're saying, oh, look, people didn't know the information. You're the cause of it, buddy.
And then he sponsors this article saying that, again, it's a bad idea, should never do it again. Look at the underlying narrative. It's everybody wants to get rid of the caucus system. Why? Because they can't control the caucus system. You can't control delegates. You can't buy an election. You can't manipulate an election. There's no...
Well, what about, is this the same
Stealing
group
an
that
election.
did was there a duplicate lineman or Clausen, and then they said, oh, they dropped out. That was brilliant.
Yeah, I
Brilliantly
don't know
evil.
if there was anything on that one.
There was. I received it as a delegate.
No. I'm saying I don't know if it
Oh,
was
if
the
they
same
were
group.
related?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So next one is who gets to choose Republicans' battle over the future of Utah's caucus system? Again, it's just a straight-up attack. Delegates to the state convention made national news this week when they rejected several Republican incumbents, which was kind of a good. But then it goes on again stating that we're all bad because we were booing and everything like that. Skipping down, Utah, the caucus convention system has staunch defenders like Utah Republican Party Chairman Rob Axson and Senator Mike Lee, who argue it allows candidates with no money or friends with deep pockets to get on the primary ballot. They say it also leads to a better citizen engagement in the political process, as delegates spend hours meeting with candidates, attending their forums, and engaging in grassroots face-to-face politics in a way that is rare today. And that's, I don't know why the public doesn't understand that simple principle.
Yep.
It's hours face-to-face. It's not... I see a news ad, or some kind of debate on TV where they just say the right things. It's face-to-face questions.
Think about this. I'm running for re-election as the party chair. I have talked either on the phone or face-to-face with well over 1,000 delegates. And I'm running for the party chair position. Don't you think these people are giving even more time to who's going to be their U.S. senator or who's going to be their congressman? Absolutely they are. The quality of engagement from delegates is phenomenal. And you do Zoom calls, you do town halls, you do in-person events, you do phone calls, you're doing letters, you're doing mail pieces. Versus another system where, like you said before, it's just the occasional ad in between the TV show you're watching. That's all
And
you're
which
seeing.
celebrity likes you?
Yeah, right. Oh, this person said this, so there we go. Just definitely a watered down approach that is, in my opinion, a far cry from the substantive dialogue that happens in our delegate process.
So I mean, we've gone through most of these at this point. So getting down to brass tacks on the chair seat, there's kind of three things that I see that we need to have in a chairperson. One is someone who can raise funds, because this is going to take a lot of money to combat this. 2, someone who can inspire people to throw their hat in the ring, even with SB54 in place, that would be better, more conservative candidates. And then 3, someone who could go and attack our current legislature, well, not necessarily attack, but get with our current legislature and try to figure out how we can get some kind of a buildup within both the House and the Senate. And find some people that you as a chairperson can work with. If it's Carrie Ann, we're going to have Stuart Adams here in a couple weeks. I'm actually in the same precinct with Stuart Adams. And see if we can't build something up to
Well, we need
where
to
these people
educate
actually get
more
rid of this.
constituents to be talking to their representatives
Absolutely.
to do the right thing.
Yep, absolutely.
While we're doing that, though, you got the more power than most people as Republicans here to actually get up to Congress and say, okay, how many people can you pull together to help combat this?
I wholeheartedly agree, and I think you laid out those 3 things exactly right. You have to have the funding to build the apparatus. I have delivered on that. I'm committed to growing, and
How do you
this
think
just
the
being
future
starting
works
point.
with donors? I mean, what's
Very,
your vision?
very good. I will tell you, I've been able to go from, we had, I don't know, $15,000 or so dollars in the bank when I came in. We've raised, and most of it we've spent actually building the apparatus, supporting our convention winners, all of that. But we have raised and deployed $3 million. I am confident that that's just the starting point. We will continue to raise the funds necessary to grow in our capacity, to empower ourselves, and to support the precinct level engagement of our delegates. The second element of what we have to do there is you have to continue to be promoting the principles and rallying people to win. It's why I'm grateful to have received the endorsement of President Trump and Senator Mike Lee and others. They've seen me in the trenches fighting for our party platform, fighting for our principles, helping them get elected. In Donald Trump's case, he endorsed me because he and his team saw me down in Arizona. They saw me deploying nearly 1,000 volunteers from Utah to Arizona, Nevada, even a few up to Montana to help win Senate seats, to help win battleground seats for President Trump. We can do many things at once. You can elevate the party.
What can
you can win
to
races.
Inspire people. I mean, I don't know if you can do announcements during the caucus. You can do flyers, commercials. I don't know what it is to say, look, if you throw your hat in the ring and you get the support of the body, this is what we're going to do as a party for you.
So the candidates have seen that. These elected officials who went through the convention process have now seen that. Again, you never had
I know
anything.
that the ones that have gone through the process have seen. I'm asking for those who have not yet thrown their house in the ring, that they need to know that they're going to have the support before they even throw their hat in the ring, to convince them to throw their hat in the ring. How do we get that
out there?
message out to people that are
thinking about it,
but are afraid to do it?
So even this year, running for municipal elections, folks that want to run for municipal elections, if you are supporting the party platform, there is support that you can have. And if you're a registered Republican who supports the platform, there's support you can get through the party apparatus. Definitely into next year's election cycle.
How do you get that word out so they know about that?
Things like this. If you're listening to this right now and thinking about running for an elected office, if you support the party platform and are a registered Republican, even in a municipal election, come and talk to us. We can be helpful. During the election cycle next year, we'll be fair to any Republican candidate until the convention. Once the convention happens, we will lean into those who earned the support of their delegates. That hard stop, as long as I'm chair, that's where we're going to be. And ultimately, I think you talked about the influence with elected officials and the ability to go up to the legislature and work with them to move things in the right direction. I have a proven track record of having been able to do that, of being able to work with those elected officials to pass good laws that are making things better, and more importantly, to prevent bad laws. You had the very first news article you brought up is where there was this hit job of a committee hearing that was brought by one former Republican who has now left the party, and rightfully so. He'll feel more comfortable elsewhere than he felt here in our party. When he brought that, and it was a total hit job, well, I had the relationships and I reached out to the legislators, and that was pulled from the agenda, and he was stripped of the support that he had, and it ultimately led to him leaving the party. There are consequences to bad behavior, And when you have the relationship, you can leverage that. I have the relationships necessary in the legislature to do that. This will allow us to continue to grow a consensus, to lean into building the party, to lean into reinvigorating the caucus convention system and making that the absolute best that it can be, because it's already the best example of a constitutional republic anywhere in the country. Let's not abandon that. Let's lean into it and strengthen it.
Yeah, I'd like to see if we can. I mean, I'd like to work with you, even as a podcast, and see if we can't
Absolutely,
our
let's do it.
connections and see if we can't build a group, maybe a small group within the House, small group within the Senate, and hopefully that grows until we actually get like a majority that will put forward a bill that gets rid of SB54.
And think about this: the hardest place that we've had is in the state Senate. But look in the state Senate, there's always turnover that's going to be happening.
Stewart.
Well, yeah, and talk to him, but keep in mind, over these next election, or a couple of election cycles, there's going to be, even if an incumbent is always winning, but there's always an upset here and there. But separate from even the upsets or the need for upsets, you're going to have a lot of turnover just simply because of the number of folks that have been there for a long time and they're a little older in years. You're going to have turnover. If we are building a strong party apparatus at the same time that there are these open seats in the state Senate, I think you have a stronger likelihood of folks that see the benefit of the party and want to be elected to not only effectuate good policy for Utah, but want to promote our platform and want to lean into supporting the caucus convention system. We need to seize that opportunity with a strong, well-funded, well-organized Utah Republican Party.
Is it in our bylaws to where you could actually sponsor ads on TV and say, these are the party?
If you raise enough money, and luckily that's one of the things that we did. So
like last year when Phil Lyman you could have come out in a TV spot on KSL or something like that. And
we paid for some billboards. We paid for digital billboards on physical signs at the side of the freeways. We did that.
It says these are our candidates.
You saw mail pieces that went out to every Republican primary voter in Salt Lake County, most of Utah County, half or so, or a third of Davis County, and all of about 9 other counties, that laid out, here were all of the convention winning candidates. We also did that statewide in text blasts. We did that statewide in emails into targeted areas. I mean, we were trying to go in all of the above approach to get the information out there. The only limiting factor was funding. And again, we deployed $250,000. Imagine if we had a $5 million budget to do that. You could start to make a major difference. But it wasn't just then. We also deployed about $60,000 in radio ads advertising caucus. The party had never done that before. We did that last year, advertising.
Well, I think that'd be very beneficial just to get people to come out to the caucus.
Exactly, and that's how you reinvigorate it.
Yeah, so there's more people. I mean, my son's had like 3 people in his caucus. I had a lot of people in mine just because Stuart Adams is in ours. He attracts a lot of people, but there's a lot of people that kind of won delegate by default because they're the only one who showed up or whatever. Showed up. So, well, kind of the last thing I want to hit here too is, again, kind of going back onto the kind of infiltration from this. I saw this article. Blue trickle against red wave. Utah may skew slightly to the left. And goes on, almost all counties in the nation shifted to the right. However, in Utah, it seems like either stayed pretty even or that Vice President Harris garnered more Democrat votes. We're still trying to sort through things, but it's interesting that she got a higher vote percentage than any Democratic candidate for the president since LBJ won the state in 1964. Morgan. So
this one, interestingly enough, is fake news. 100% fake news.
That's what I'd like to get down to the bottom.
The Financial Times put this out on election night. So they put on election night, and they had all these like red arrows and blue arrows, like in every county if they moved to the left from the previous presidential election year, or if they moved to the right. And on election night, they said Utah was one of 2 states. I think the other one was Oregon, maybe Washington. So Utah was one of 2 states that moved to the left. They said this on election night before our ballots before our polls were even closed.
Really?
Well, fast forward 2 days, and not only was that not true, we moved to the right. So we became more conservative. We had a higher turnout for Donald Trump. Republicans performed better last year than they did in 2020. So 100% fake news. And it was incredibly frustrating that night because as I had that shared with me, like, what's happening in Utah? I'm like, we haven't even finished counting our votes and people are still in line. I knew it wasn't going to play out. And in fact, Senator John Johnson has a tweet out today, in fact, on this very thing. So go and look at his post on X and maybe you can include it here on the podcast. But he goes into that very thing and lays out why the information is inaccurate. And in fact, we moved to the right. Utah ultimately on last year's election results was the 11th most conservative state in the country. Now, I think we dropped one position. We had been 10th before, but that wasn't a matter of us not moving to the right. It's that somebody behind us moved to the right even more than we did.
I don't understand why we're not top 5. We should be.
I agree. I don't think we should rest at 11 or 10 or even 9. I agree with you. But this portrayal, again, it's because people have Utah in their sights. They want to see Utah fail. They want to see Utah turn purple and then turn blue. They want to undermine a state that they know is God-fearing, that they know loves family. And frankly, I'm of the opinion they know it's the capital of a worldwide religion. They want to see woke policies undermine it.
They see the capital worldwide religion. If they can see that fall,
if they can undermine this, they know that it wins
Idaho,
so much.
Then it'll undermine Arizona. Yep. It'll undermine.
So yes, we are going even in the right direction. 100% fake news. Please do post John Johnson's tweet so that you can have folks reading into that. But yes, not true. But we can't rest on our laurels. I want to keep moving until Utah is this bastion of freedom and liberty and transparency and election integrity and accountability that we know will protect the future that all of our kids deserve to have.
I don't want to let you go without you telling us that moment when you received the information or the news that Trump was endorsing you. What was that like?
Humbling, honestly. I was actually on the phone with a delegate, and I kept getting all these texts that were coming through on my phone. And so you're trying to have a conversation. It's like ping, ping, ping. It's like, what's going on? And then I started getting a bunch of emails and my laptop was open and I finished the conversation with the delegate and tried to catch up, and it's people saying, oh, look what just happened. So I certainly I was hopeful that
So who
he
was
would weigh
contacted? It wasn't you.
No, President Trump put it out on Truth Social. He just posted it. He ended up weighing in on 4 chairs races across the country, and in Georgia, in Delaware, in North Carolina, and in Utah. And I'll tell you, I know these other 3 individuals. They're wonderful human beings. All 4 of us have had President Trump's back. And all 4 of us have fought for him. And so I've had a couple of delegates today say, oh, well, does Donald Trump even know you? Well, yeah, we've met a number of times, and I'm not saying that he knows me well, but he knows that I've had his back. He has seen what we have done, and I find it interesting. Again, he weighed in on these 4 races. There's 50 races happening in the country right now in the Republican Party leadership or thereabouts. I think some are a little bit off year, but there's dozens of these races. He weighed in on 4. And again, there's 4 of us that have had President Trump's back. And one of the many things that I like about President Trump is he's a loyal human being. He knows that if you have his back, you can take to the bank that he's going to have your back. And I think that's what we've seen. And what I mentioned earlier tonight, even though President Trump comes from an upbringing of privilege, he has connected with so many Americans across this country because he is sincere and he has our back. So humbled and very much appreciate that President Trump has endorsed me for a re-election here to the Utah Republican Party chair.
Thanks for sharing that. That's really cool.
I'm incredibly glad you're here. Like I said at the very beginning, I think it's a choice between better and best. I'm thrilled with that type of a decision. I don't want to be mediocre or accept, okay, this is what we're going to have to make do with, right? It's a great decision. And I just want to be able to see the party chair kind of take the Republican Party, make it into a big gorilla and start throwing its weight around, right? Yeah. And start controlling congressional people that think they can control everything, and then figuring out how we can use our power as the party to get better people into office, and that's what we want to see happen.
Well, thank you for the time. I appreciate the chance to chat with you guys and have these conversations.
And we're going to be live at convention this next week.
We'll be there next week.
come up and see us. We're going to be interviewing people from the body, and
we'll be pulling you in and asking you some of these same questions. I mean, I want to ask questions about what do you think of Trump? What do you think of the tariffs? What do you think of what's going on in Israel? What's going on in Ukraine? I mean, we just want to throw out all these topics and just kind of get general public's
and who you'd like to
opinions.
see us have on God and Country.
Yeah. Well, great to have you on, but good luck next week.
Hey, thank you.
I think
Appreciate
you will get a lot of support. I think Lyman might get a lot of support too, but
I expect both of us to get a lot of support. And like I mentioned earlier, we're friends, and no matter who
that's
wins,
the biggest
we're going to
thing I
work
see
together.
Is I think no matter what happens, you're both going to pull out on top and
The party is better together than
work
divided.
together. And I don't think it's going to divide anybody either. Whether you win or he wins, I don't think it's going to divide each other because you guys are so uniquely fitted for the position and in such a positive outlook on everything. And like I said, I think delegates, all we care about is how quickly can we get rid of SB54 and how much weight can the Republican Party throw around. Glad to see you on board. We'll see everybody next week at the convention and talk to everybody later.